and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Daryl Grove, and I'm joined by a man who... he has the meat. His name is Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
Hello. Twitter got their wish. You said the catchphrase. And you said it better than Ian Dark. I will give you that.
Got to give the people what they want.
Oof. He didn't know what he was getting into with that, did he? He hadn't previously read the ad copy, and when he got to that one, he didn't really know how to deliver it, did he?
I don't know. I mean, he went for it.
Kind of.
A for effort.
Okay.
For Ian Dark. And it was more accurate than his... take on Jordan Morris's stronger left foot.
That's true.
From the previous game.
All right. So he's redeemed himself, although one of those was reading a script and one of those was observing a game for 90 minutes and getting a foot wrong.
Speaking of, we observed a game for 90 minutes. Mm-hmm. It was USA 1, Chile 1. Mm-hmm. Then we re-observed large chunks of it for this big review. All right, question at the top of the show, Taylor. Was this performance from the US men's national team any good?
I think it was better than we thought it was in the quick take. Yeah. I'm surprised to say that.
Because we weren't happy in the quick take.
We were not. It was better than we thought it was. I would still say it was not a good performance, but I think it was a better performance given squad limitations.
There we go.
Thing I'm going to add on to it as well.
Yes, so we're going to probably get into the details of like what the problems were for the US. They're essentially Arturo Vidal, but how we did or did not deal with him. But in the end, it is a lot of like not our first choice players going up against a Chilean team that we really thought might be about to fold, because there's a thing before about they weren't happy with the coach, Rada.
Yeah.
And so when Pulisic scored that first goal, we kind of thought, oh, this is going to be like the end of Ronaldo Rada. We're going to beat up on his team. Greg Berhalter will carry him around on our shoulders, and then Chile will be looking for a new coach.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like that was the way it was going to go.
First 5 minutes,
it's like, all right, we're gonna kill a coach's career right here, and then it didn't end up happening.
He's already had a career, but
this is true. Yes. We're going to kill it again for him. He's been fired in a few games.
Any other like big picture notes on the performance before we get down into the details of the goals and then maybe the more tactically things?
Yeah, I mean, I hesitate to say this because like it will be the way SportsCenter talk about this, for example. But it's the case that going into
I like that you think SportsCenter will talk about this.
I think they made fun of it. I saw somebody talking about Trey Wingo, I think it is, said something about the U.S. Anyway, going into this camp, the talk was, the Trinity that we talked about of Adams, McKennie, Pulisic.
Yep.
Going into this game, we knew Adams wouldn't be there. He'd been sent home. We knew McKennie was injured. And it was the case for me that when Pulisic came out, suddenly you look at that attack and you think, oh, there's not as much there as I thought. Mm-hmm. And especially when you're going up against Chile, albeit a weakened Chile, it suddenly gets that much more obvious when it is Sebastian Lletget and Gyasi Zardes and Corey Baird and Christian Roldan.
We'll get into individual player performances lately, but I think big picture, it's worth saying that the limitations of those guys versus Arturo Vidal or Isla on the right wing were really painfully obvious.
Exactly. And so that's what I mean when I say that it was a better performance than I thought, but it still showed that when you have those players as your kind of focal point of your attack or that level of player, you're not going to be able to kind of execute the game plan that you might if you have more technically precise players in that starting 11.
Yeah, another big picture thing maybe to mention is we talked a lot about the Berhalter system and like what we do when we have the ball and like trying to unbalance the opposition and pull people out of position. And will DeAndre Yedlin, when we go forward and we have position, will Yedlin stay at right back or will he drift into central midfield? And the truth is Chile had something like 60-something% possession. The US's best chances, including the goal, were in transition, not in possession. We didn't really get a chance to see what the US looked like in possession. So the Berhalter system in terms of attacking possession play, positional play and all that, it just wasn't even an option here because we didn't have the ball for long enough. So when we're talking about the Berhalter system in this game, at least one interesting way to think about it is the defensive system. Yeah. Because that's mostly what was being tested.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Especially as the game goes on, especially in the end of the first half and then like the first 10 minutes of the second half is where I think you really saw that defense being tested.
Yeah.
But I also think that if you look, like we both, I think, struggled with this, but looking at our overall game notes when we went back to rewatch, it was better than the U.S. up until like the 34th minute than I thought it would be. I thought they kind of collapsed after that goal for Chile, that it suddenly became this sort of, we're just putting out fires all over the place.
Yeah.
But it was still not consistent enough that I feel like you could say this is clearly what the United States was trying to do. They were working it through here. They just couldn't get this pass, or they just couldn't get that shot. It was a lot of, Chile gave the ball away, we counterattacked, and it was almost a shot. We gave the ball away, and Chile attacked. And it just, because of that, it was sort of back and forth, but not in they're both playing this expansive, really exciting attacking soccer. It was sort of who's going to make the worst mistake first. And I think you could say it was Chile first because it was the United States who took that lead.
But then who's going to make the mistakes most?
Well, there you go.
Was the US. Well, remember, in this game finished 1-1. We did not lose. But I'd say a thing we did lose, when we did our preview, we said, this is a contrast of styles. Chile are pressing and frenetic. Berhalter wants to be controlled and possession. And this game will go one way or the other. It went the Chile way. In that the US did not have the ball and our chances were all in transition. The whole game was frenetic and there were people misplacing passes. I think we played Chile's game. They didn't play ours.
Yeah, I think that's the case. I would say, though, that we don't know necessarily if that's what the United States wanted to do. There's a chance that Greg Berhalter looked at the injuries he had and the squad he had going into this game and thought, maybe this isn't the team that's going to play expansive possession soccer against Chile, so maybe we are going to look to be a little bit more ruthless on the counter and try to keep our shape a little bit more.
It's really interesting because I just assume that he always wants to play the possession style that he wants to play.
It makes me wonder if because I do think we didn't see when the U.S. did have possession, we didn't see Edlund really go central to be that like other central midfielder. So it does make me wonder then.
We did once, but we think maybe it was an accident, right? There's just a loose ball in midfield that he charged and got and had that shot.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that was more of like an outlier than it was the rule. And so then I wonder if maybe if you have a dedicated DeAndre Edlund at fullback, if it is going to be that's the shape or kind of position he'll play when the United States is trying to play a more standard sit back and counter approach.
Interesting. All right, so before we get too detailed. Let's get to the goals.
Let's do it.
Because early on, fourth minute, Christian Pulisic has the ball in the back of the net, and things were looking good. This looked like a very nice transition play, coordinated move. Pulisic running beyond Zardes. I mean, it was really exciting.
It was. It still comes from a ball over the top from Chile. Not a lot of pressure. We went back and looked to see if maybe that long ball was forced.
Yeah.
But it's still the case that because the U.S.
Tim Ream had stepped to put pressure on, I believe, Isla, which is going to be definitely a theme of this game. And then Isla tries to play that ball over the top.
I would still say that, like, if you're saying stepped and put pressure on, it's not the like Chilean pressure of like in his face and he's just trying to get the ball read.
Yes.
It's more like, oh, he's coming at me. Okay, I'll try this.
He wasn't close enough to read Isla's tattoos.
He was not. Well, maybe some of them. Some are bigger than others. But we'll talk more about like the kind of things that started to maybe fall apart a little bit for the U.S. or the U.S. struggled with.
But not yet.
We won't. But I'll say here, part of the reason why that long ball doesn't work is because the back line had stepped up and aggressively so.
True.
So now I think because they weren't worried about a pacey threat or anything like that. So that ball over the top. That said,
looking for Castillo, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's kind of almost gets to him, but it's Horvath does a good job to get off his line about 20, 25 yards from his own goal, gets a foot to it, hits it clear, as we said in the quick take, is not aiming for Gyasi Zardes.
We don't think.
But I think just kind of wants to get rid and knows to put it in that vague area.
And makes a connection and lofts it to midfield. Nothing wrong with that when the alternative is Castillo in on goal.
Yeah. No, nothing wrong with it at all. I say that to, again, go back to my point of even when it was good, it still felt like it was sort of like, oh, it was really good, but it kind of came through like, oh, okay, he hit it long and then we hit it back. And then Gyasi Zardes had a great bit of skill. So I would say it's like, usually when we break down a goal, we end up going back and it's like, okay, there's this pass 45 seconds before the goal. And really here, it's like two very good pieces of skill from Gyasi Zardes and a good run and finish from Christian Pulisic. That's about what wraps up this goal.
So let's get into those positives, because I loved Pulisic running beyond Zardes.
Yep.
I loved Zardes receiving this ball with his first, he turns with his first touch, right? Which I think is the key to it.
Yep.
If he just like traps it with his back to goal, the moment's kind of gone, right? Because then he's got to turn around and find Pulisic. Because he turns with his first touch and Pulisic has run beyond him, it's Gary Medel, who's playing as one of the three... Gary Medel playing one of the three Chilean centre-backs, who is forced with the decision, do I track Pulisic running through? Do I step to Zardes? He steps to Zardes, and that's why Pulisic is open when Zardes plays the pass through.
I also think that he steps to Zardes because even though it's only the fourth minute, I think the United States had sort of demonstrated already that their control wasn't great under pressure. And I do wonder if Medel thinks he's going to try to bring this down with his back to the goal. I'm going to put him under pressure early, and he'll drop this ball back off, counterattack done.
Yeah.
And because it's a quick turn from Zardes, I think he catches Medel at a time when Medel thinks I'll have time to get to him to close him down and kind of put pressure on him. And instead he's caught between the two, so then he has to fully commit. But now he's kind of making a lunging tackle instead of a calculated amount of pressure, and thus there's the ball in for Christian Pulisic.
And isn't Zardes' ball to Pulisic kind of a sneaky, it's like not the regular just like ball on the floor side foot pass, right? It's like a weird...
It's like laces slightly outside of the foot, but it's basically
Yeah.
because he brings it down with his right foot on the turn, as you said, and then plays it with his right foot again. So both touches are right-footed to play in Pulisic.
So can we have a moment of respect for Zardes? Because this is some great play up against a really fearsome defender who usually gets there and sticks the ball and comes away with it.
There
Gary
were
Medel,
reasons,
2014 World Cup, he was kind of unbeatable.
There were reasons to be frustrated with Gyasi Zardes for sure in this game at times.
Oh, we'll get into bigger picture performances later. Maybe.
I still have him as one of my 4 best players in this game for the United States. So, because he did, again, a lot of not like necessarily glorified work, and it's not stuff that's going to make the highlight reel, but he was really trying to stretch the back line when he could, to link up with Pulisic when he could, to lead the press when it was on. And even in the second half, yes, he has like a bad control and one where he tries to drop in, but even then he's still trying to facilitate some sort of attack when the U.S. got really cautious near the end. So I felt like he was one who was willing to take chances even under pressure and try some stuff, and here he tries some stuff and it pays off with a goal.
And then Pulisic threw in goal, a fully fit Pulisic at this point. Arias, I believe, is the keeper, definitely not Claudio Bravo, comes racing out and Pulisic just lifts it over him. It's a nice finish from young Mr. Christian Pulisic.
It certainly is. And it's this is where, like, I don't know, maybe this is like me, like gift horse in the mouth sort of thing. I don't know, but it is the case that he scores this goal and it's a really well taken goal. But then the next 3 or 4 sequences from Pulisic, it's him driving at defenders and kind of getting dispossessed or running into defenders or like miscontrolling, and the goalkeeper comes out and picks it up. And
there's that one chance where he accelerates away. Is it Yara? Maybe takes a weird angle on him and Pulisic accelerates, but then he has that left-footed touch that takes him too close to Arias. That could have been a second goal, right?
I mean, I think Hara does really well to step to Pulisic because otherwise that ball is on to Gyasi Zardes.
You're shaming me with the pronunciation?
No, it's just I think we've done this before and we ended up settling on Hara, so that's what I'm going to say. But I think that ball is on as a through ball to Gyasi Zardes. Hara does a really good job to kind of like take a quick step towards Pulisic, and I think then Christian Pulisic thinks, okay, I'll get around him real fast because he stepped to me. But actually what Hara's done is just kind of close that gap a little bit, just enough that then Pulisic is in a foot race to try to outrun him, and then it's the heavy touch.
So I remember watching saying, he should have squared it, and you were saying, watch what Hara does. And you're right, it's really good angles from Hara. Yeah.
And so that was my only like kind of negative takeaway, is that there were moments when I wanted Pulisic to just try to do a little less and then do more when the situation allows for it. And instead it felt like he was kind of, after that first goal, scented blood in the water and thought, I can get a couple more and really put this game away.
Oh, but then again, 30-something the minute he comes out. I think there's bigger implications for all of that. Not big picture, but in this game, we'll get you, because we know what we're doing here. We've got a show outline. We'll get to that later. Oh, but Chile equalise.
Yeah, they do.
5 minutes after the US have scored, Chile equalise. I think we're going to spend some time breaking down this goal, because for me, this goal from Opazo, the left wing back, there are so many things that happen in the run-up to this goal that are sort of the big picture problems of how Chile gave the US all kinds of trouble.
Yes.
So I'm a little concerned about us getting too deep in the weeds. So maybe it's first worth saying that this ended up in a mad scramble.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically a ball in, Vidal turns, scramble in the box, more scramble in the box, even a little bit more scramble in the box, then a shot. Eventually it goes to Opazo. He's wide open at the far post. His shot is deflected but still goes in. That's how Chile are able to equalize. Yeah. But with all that said,
I would also add, in the middle of all the scramble, the one cool head is Chilean number 9, Castillo, doing some futsal skills.
Yeah. So we'll get to that. But like to go back even further, so I think it starts with the ball into Vidal, because that's the thing that I think we both were sort of focused on in terms of what was maybe a deficiency in the U.S. defense.
And a thing that happened a lot was Arturo Vidal, who was essentially the right centre mid in the 5-3-2, finding that little pocket of space, which is exactly where he receives this ball. And the pocket of space is like to the left of Michael Bradley, who's the number 6 central defensive midfielder. It's behind Paul Arriola, and it's ahead of Tim Ream, and it's ahead of Omar Gonzalez, and no one knows who's supposed to pick him up. Arturo Vidal's so good at getting himself unmarked.
And this is where I feel like, I know we're going to get into the specifics of the goal, but like from a general one for me, this is where I feel like it's not as bad of a result, because in the end, it was 1-1 against Chile, and it could have been worse, but I also don't think it was like necessarily as bad as it was from the US, but it still showed the kind of vulnerability of this team in its current incarnation, because I think Matt Doyle was making this point during the game, that it felt like the US kind of never knew, is it the time to step or is it the time to stay where we need to be? And I do think part of that was because they expected Chile to be in a 4-1 or a 4-4-2 diamond, basically. I think they thought it was going to be Gary Medel at the base, Arturo Vidal is the number 10, so we can put numbers in the middle, we'll mark him out of the game, Michael Bradley will be there to front him, the defenders will step, we got this locked down.
Yep.
And basically then he drifted 6 yards to the right, and that seemed to throw everything out of control.
Does this get to the idea of like players having specific instructions,
Yes.
thinking about the level of information that Greg Berhalter has given them in terms of instructions,
Mm-hmm.
which again, we love, right? We're that show that loves that stuff, but maybe they're not playing instinctually, which is kind of what Klinsmann asked them to do, right? Here's no instructions, go figure it out yourselves.
Yeah.
That didn't work. Here's loads of instructions, and if it doesn't match with what the opposition is doing, maybe it then starts to fall apart. Like you said, even if Vidal is just off center by 10 yards, the whole thing falls apart.
And I think it also, this is where I still go back to the system is partially to explain / blame. Is that, like, I said this when we rewatched it, that it felt like at times Tim Ream was like an AI player in FIFA, that it was like, my job is to go wide, I will go wide. Yes, Arturo Vidal is now wide open in the middle, but I've been told to go wide and defend, so that's what I'm going to go do. I'm assuming he's been told to go wide, I should add.
Yes, I agree with you. We sort of went back and forth about this while we were watching, right? I agree with you that it was definitely, he was given instructions, not just to go wide randomly.
Yeah.
Again, if you're not familiar, Tim Ream was the left back in the back four. But Isla, the Chilean right wing back in this situation, I mean, we spotlighted him in the preview, right? He's been around for a long time. He is deadly, barreling down that right wing, receiving the ball, getting crosses in. He is an absolute threat, right? He's like premium DeAndre Yedlin. Maybe more so. So Tim Ream's job at left back was whenever Isla was open on that right touchline to essentially, we think his instructions were leave the back four, leave the other three defenders, and essentially just go and mark him and make sure. Again, the US goal, that slight pressure, he's way disconnected from the rest of the back four. It kind of worked in that sense. For this Chilean goal, it doesn't work, right?
It does not work.
And it had happened a lot of other times. And it's also Vidal's occupying that centre-right space. So I almost think it compounds the problem because then Tim Ream leaves, and then Omar Gonzalez has more space to deal with, right?
Yep.
Which is maybe not his strength.
No, it's certainly not. And I think it also then, it leaves question marks. And when there's uncertainty for players, I think that's when, as we've talked about before, you're then having to think and sort of react and ask everybody else what they're doing, and you're no longer necessarily responding immediately to what the other team is doing.
Yep.
So here, because you have Vidal a little bit out wide, and maybe Tim Ream has gone wide to get to Isla. Thank you. I always want to call him Arias. I keep wanting to do that.
I thought I saved you.
Because you have that, then it becomes the defense is sort of, okay, Paul Arriola is going to try to block off that pass into Arturo Vidal.
Which was part of his job, right? Cut the angles off to Vidal.
And then if that ball goes in, I think Omar Gonzalez was then the one who was going to step and maybe just put Vidal under pressure so that he couldn't turn. Here is an example of when both of those things broke down. Arriola, I think maybe like just not aware of how good Arturo Vidal is, or it's easy to switch off when, again, you're kind of reacting and looking around and heads on a swivel. I think he basically takes one or two steps too far to the left, and that little
thinking
gap.
About Isla as well, maybe?
I think probably. I think he keeps looking back to see Isla just to make sure, because if you've got a player standing on the touchline with no one around them for 30 yards, if you're that defender or that defensive player, in this case with Arriola, you're thinking that should not be happening. That close to goal, that player should not be that wide open. So maybe you just, even if you don't mean to, you still cheat a little bit, and it opens up that ball in. Then I think the idea is that if Vidal controls it with his back to goal, similar to the Gary Medel situation with Pulisic's goal, Omar steps to him, puts him under pressure, he can't really turn. The difference here being that, similar to Jesse Zardes, he turns with that first touch. Now he's going at goal, and Omar Gonzalez is 5 yards away, 5 yards maybe deeper than he should be. And so now it's sort of everybody scramble and react, because Arturo Vidal, the number one player you don't want on the ball dribbling at goal, is both of those things.
And worth noting, Vidal did this a lot, right? He received the ball in this space, and with his first touch, he turned and faced goal. This is the mark of a superior player. We always talked about the half turn, right? Remember we were talking about maybe Mihailovic wasn't always on the half turn. Tyler Adams, we've watched slowly improve his half turn. McKennie and Pulisic weren't receiving the ball on the half turn against Ecuador and going at them. Vidal put on a masterclass of how to find space, receive the ball, and almost effortlessly be facing the opposition goal and ready to cause trouble. And the first thing he does is slip that first pass into Castillo.
Yes. Yeah, and then I think, does it end up getting
Miazga steps,
play?
half tackles?
Yeah.
I don't know whether to credit or blame him here.
I think it's
weird.
basically, it was, and this happened a few different times for the U.S. in this game, where it was like Miazga makes the right play and makes a play on the ball and gets a foot to it, but then isn't really controlling it, so I think it ends up playing off of his other foot, and then it goes back to Vidal. But that doesn't just happen. This is the other element of Arturo Vidal that's so undervalued. It's why when we did our what player would you have play every single position if you could, my selection was Arturo Vidal, because he never gives up. And that ball, once he plays it in, I think a lot of players would be frustrated and say, like, oh, I should have played a better ball. Oh, that's my bad. Put a hand up, whatever.
Oh, Miazga's legs are too long.
Yeah. And instead, Arturo Vidal follows that pass. Always follow your ball. Always follow the pass. And in this case, he does, and he gets that ball right back, and then he plays it into Castillo again. And this is another huge difference for me between this Chilean team and this U.S. team, is Castillo takes 5 or 6 touches back to goal in the box. And
Doesn't he look like a futsal player while he's doing it?
He really does.
Soul rolls.
And I think it's like diffusion of responsibility a little bit here, where no American player wants to be the one to get turned and give him a wide open shot on goal.
Yeah.
But nobody also wants to be the one who's kind of backing off and not doing anything. So instead you have a little bit backing off and kind of letting him control the ball, Castillo, and back up. But then you have a player like Christian Roldan who comes in to make the big, powerful, sweeping tackle and completely misses the ball. Yeah. But now because he's made that play.
It's like I think Castillo showed him a little bit of it and then rolled it back, and Roldan swung at it.
But this is the issue, and this is why Jurgen Klopp loses his mind when a player goes in too hard on a challenge and loses it, because now everybody else has backed off. If you're Christian Roldan and you're running in and saying, like, my ball, I'm going to make a play, and then you miss it, everybody else has reacted to you reacting, and now everybody else is then having to sort of figure out what to do on the fly.
I don't want to be too harsh on Christian Roldan, but do you want to hear the worst part?
Yeah.
Roldan left Aranguiz
Yep.
so that he could go and make that whiff tackle in thin air. Aranguiz is the guy that Castillo eventually finds when he drops the ball. Aranguiz, who's one of Chile's best players, right? We know him from various tournaments, Copa America winner and all that. Then he has the shot at goal, right? This is a genuine, really good chance. Bodies in front of him, but Aranguiz takes the shot. I believe it kind of hits like the trailing leg of Omar and just pops up in the air. Right?
Yeah, and pops wide to
Opazzo, who is also
Italian. I apologize.
Is also wide open because DeAndre Yedlin has also been drawn into the madness.
Yep.
He's just like, scramble! Everybody's got to get in there and try and get the ball. I'm not sure Roldan helped him either. So Yedlin's pulled in. Opazzo's open. So when that ball, it's unfortunate that it pops wide to him, but it would have been better if someone was marking him, right?
Yeah.
This is what I'm a big fan of. Everybody mark your man and take your responsibility versus everybody swarm. Because when you swarm, you're susceptible to the ball can go wide or a smart pass can go wide and you're dead. They've killed you. Opazzo finishes. You ready to talk about the finish?
Sure.
I want to talk about Ethan Horvath.
Okay.
He is hugging that near post.
Yep.
He definitely has done the job that keepers are told, protect your near post. I think he you spotted this before me, so I want to give you credit for it, but I think he kind of overprotects the near post and gives Opazzo the far post.
I think because he's so worried about Castillo and then the shot coming from Aranguiz and probably Arturo Vidal being in there as well, I think he is so amped up at this point that there's a decent chance he's maybe lost a little bit of where he is in relation to the goal. So when Horvath then goes to cover that near post, I think he's probably, in his mind, has like maybe 1.5 yards to his right that would be covering the near post. So if that shot goes really to the near, he can kind of slide across and get it, but it still takes away the far post. But in actuality, he's almost touching the near post, which basically gives Opazzo the entire far side to shoot at. I think it's Omar who slides out and maybe gets a little bit of a deflection on it, but even so, it's still in the back of the net. But I think a big part of that is the positioning of Horvath.
Oh, okay.
And actually,
we're not 1-1 after 9 minutes. There's more,
but we're kind of not even done with that goal because, I singled out Christian Roldan for whiffing on that challenge.
It's like the most obvious error because it's the most embarrassing.
It is, but
in many ways.
That's the obvious one. But then there are so many subtle ones. Like one of the ones that you spotted is Michael Bradley in this equation is sort of doing what I think he's been asked to do of shielding the back four to some extent and kind of trapping off.
Angles?
Yeah, basically. So
use angles to stop passes happening?
Yeah, so Valdez, the other forward alongside Castillo, has dropped in a little.
Quietly good, by the way.
He was very, but he drops behind this play as Castillo's holding it up. And Bradley, I think, goes to cut off that pass and does that, but then he does his sort of hop around like you can't pass it back. Meanwhile, Valdez has just made a run into the box, and if Castillo
loses him,
and if Castillo squared that ball, it's a one-time shot. Completely uncontested. So it's not to say that it was just Christian Roldan and everything fell apart. It was sort of a lot of little errors in this sequence leads to the goal, but is also sort of very revealing to me because if this whole game were just chaos, if the previous friendly had just been they're running all over the place, we can't really figure out what they're doing, this doesn't seem like a system, it would be kind of par for the course. But I think because we've seen the U.S. under Greg Berhalter look so organized and the defense, this was the first time they've conceded in Berhalter's tenure. They've looked so...
Aaron Long hasn't conceded at all.
He has not. But because they've looked so good, it makes this look that much worse.
Yes,
and I think a lot of the mistakes that were made from the U.S., especially in possession, especially when playing under pressure, looked worse because they haven't looked this bad yet under Greg Berhalter.
All right, I've got two more things I want to think about with this. I argue that Tim Ream, if he doesn't go and track Isla, he's in a position to step to Arturo Vidal and make this really hard. And I think it might be that sort of I was following orders thing. And I still think a big theory I have is too much following orders and not reacting to what's going on.
I agree with you completely. And I didn't at first because I felt like when we were watching this live that you were putting it a little bit. I'm like, oh, Tim Ream keeps going wide. Tim Ream's kind of making a mistake. And I was more inclined to think that it's the system that's letting him down. But where I agree,
it's going to be two things.
Well, where I agree with you more is that you go back to the game against Ecuador, and we saw consistently throughout that first half, players going over and talking to Greg Berhalter. And every time there was an injury, everybody went over and asked questions and asked clarifying questions. And you could tell they were trying to figure it out. Now, that may have happened, and we just didn't see it on camera. But I didn't see it on camera, and I never saw Tim Ream go over there and say, hey, this isn't working. We need to figure this out. I never saw Paul Arriola do that or Omar Gonzalez. We saw Matt Miazga.
That's one of the things I love about McKennie, right? He had that conversation about, like, oh, I feel like I'm in Jordan's way. Should I do this? Should I do that?
Yeah. And that led to Will Trapp getting more instructions and Paul Arriola getting more instructions. And here, I think we saw Matt Miazga in the second half. We weren't sure if he was saying, like, I'm tired, I need a sub, or if he was talking about something that wasn't working. But that might be the only time I saw a player go over to Berhalter and say, like, hey, hold on, I need help with this. So even if it was the system and Ream was kind of executing what he was asked to do, it still goes back to the like AI player that I was talking about because it's not recognizing, wait, if I go there, I'm leaving this guy open. But that's what the system is asking me to do. So the system isn't right. We need to change this. There wasn't that level of next level thinking.
Second thing I want to ask about is the sort of weird half tackle from Miazga and then the trailing leg block that went to Opazo from Gonzalez. Do we just say they're unlucky, or do we say a better defender would have just made a firmer tackle to begin with, or a better defender would have not just settled for having a trailing leg out there? I'm asking you because I don't know the answer.
This is maybe a very a biased, opinionated answer because I know some people will disagree with what I'm about to say. But I go back to when I got my coaching license, and I've said this on the show before. And one of my verbal crutches that I got dinged for in my final evaluation was that I said unlucky a lot. That if a player shot wide or hit the post or just missed a header, I would say, oh, unlucky, next time.
You were trying to encourage.
I thought I was encouraging, but my evaluator's point was there's no such thing as unlucky. They didn't do something right. Something wasn't done properly.
This is the Greg Norman thing. Happen. The more I practice, the luckier I get.
Exactly. And so I think maybe things can be two things, but it is probably the case that if other people are doing their jobs a little bit better, that ball doesn't go in and Miazga doesn't have to make that play. Maybe Miazga could have reacted faster, but I think it's not necessarily that he was unlucky in that moment. I think he did what he could, but I think the unlucky thing that was actually maybe not very good was the defending around him that led to that situation.
I think that's a really good answer to
Thank
that.
you.
Yeah. Okay. We've got lots more tactical things to talk about, including the Pulisic injury, the changes we made in the second half, whether Berhalter made the right choices to begin the game even. We're going to get into all that in the second half of today's show. But first, today's show is sponsored by Twillory.
It sure is.
Twillory shirts. We own them, we wear them, we love them, and we get to advertise them.
We sure do. And I want to say that Greg Berhalter, I think this is the first time we've seen him in a collared shirt coaching. I might be wrong, but I think he was in a sweater ensemble in the first game. I liked it. It was a good collared shirt look for him, but we're going to have the Gold Cup coming up. Things are going to change. Temperature is going to change. So we were then pondering what would be the ideal Twillory shirt to give Greg Berhalter for the Gold Cup.
All right, so I looked into this.
And Daryl's going to do this, by the way. He's going to use his own money. He's going to buy whatever shirt we agree upon. He's going to send it to Greg Berhalter.
I mean, if we do this, I'll probably ask Twillory to provide the product.
I think in full Sharpie on the front, it should say, from Daryl, and then you could just send it to him, and we'll see if he wears it. That's how we'll know.
So the options we're picking from with Twillory, there are four major categories. There's the performance non-iron, the safe cotton non-iron, the untuckable, which is it's not quite as long, so it's you can wear it untucked, and the casual Friday shirts, the button-down polos. I've gone for the untuckable category because I want Berhalter looking casual in the Gold Cup. I think it might be a very stressful summer. I would like to, see him not have to tuck his shirt in, but still look nice and sharp. And because it's going to be warm, I've gone with the untuckable white Oxford. And it's not your classic white Oxford. It's also got Twillory shirts have this nice sort of coloured. Accent is the wrong word that I keep using, but it's not all white.
It's a splash of colour.
A splash of colour on the the part where you button.
You got to watch my queer eye.
The side that has the buttons has a strip of slightly different coloured fabric, just so it's got a little something different about it. So it's a white Oxford with a splash of colour, and you don't have to tuck it in. It's designed to be just short enough to not tuck in.
Well, first of all, I don't think American coaches should look like slobs. Tuck that shirt in. Let's get it together here. I'm going with the no iron performance white moisture wicking cooling tech. The leader shirt. That's what I'm going with.
More high tech.
Yeah, you're darn right it does.
Performance,
but
okay.
It's no iron and it's performance, so it's going to be hot in the summer. They're going to be traveling around, so you don't have to worry about all the wrinkles when you pack them in your suitcase. He can keep wearing that shirt.
Does this mean no Nick Lima, Tyler Adams right back roll?
What do you mean?
No wrinkles.
There we go. That's terrible. I'm just going to let you think about that one for a minute. You're laughing at it yourself.
So, tactical wrinkles, not shirt wrinkles.
That
will be the motto for Greg Berhalter this summer.
But then he's going to be playing in very hot, very humid conditions, I would guess. So you want the moisture wicking, you want the cooling technology. But more than anything, I think you want a shirt called the Leader. I think that's what your head coach should be wearing.
Oh, yeah?
It's either that or North Korean dictator.
It's called
Those
the Leader?
are the two. Yes,
Describe it to me. Or show it to me on your iPad, at least. Like, what color is it?
White.
Oh, all right.
Performance white.
So we're both on white.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, the other one that you could go with...
Might match the jerseys a little bit as well.
That's fine. I think he was wearing a white shirt today. That might be why I thought it. Yeah. There's also the Safe Cotton non-iron skull shirt. It's white. As you said, it's got like the accent around the collar and the cuffs, I think. Yeah. But it's got little skulls in there. I feel like that's a Greg Berhalter look. The shaved head, slightly skullish appearance. But it shows you that he's hardcore. He won't stand for your nonsense.
Perfect for Berhalter then. Yeah. Okay, the other thing, the last time we did a Twillery ad read, you asked... How do they make it non-iron?
Yeah, and the answer was magic.
Your theory was magic done by wizards, right? I've looked into this. You're sort of right, but the wizards use science. So in other lesser non-iron shirts, the way Twillery phrase it is, those shirts get an F for formaldehyde because that's what they're using to make it non-iron. Twillery has massively reduced the amount of formaldehyde. Still a tiny little bit, but then they use... other things to make the shirt nice and soft and buttery and not all formaldehyde.
Buttery?
Yeah.
A buttery shirt.
Buttery soft to the touch. That's in the copy.
Between a butter shirt and us beginning with like, what's the deal with non-iron? I feel like we're on the verge of a Seinfeld episode, and I don't know how I feel about it.
I'll take one.
But you know what I do feel about? You know what I do feel good about? There we go. I got there. Is that Total Soccer Show listeners can get $25 off their first shirt order by going to Twillery.com/TSS and entering the promo code TSS at checkout.
The link will be in the show notes, Twillery.com/TSS, TSS at checkout. And thank you to Twillery for sponsoring today's episode. And thank you to Taylor for saving me an edit.
I do my best. I do my best, my friend. So we've talked about the goals. We've talked about kind of like the big moments of this game. But I think it's worth now kind of getting into the more nuanced, it's going to be kind of like ranging conversation a little bit because
tacticsy.
I want to talk a little bit more about
player performance later.
Yeah, player performance later. Right now, like kind of what we thought maybe didn't work for the U.S. Because as we said, or at least as I said, it wasn't as bad of a performance as I thought it was, but it certainly wasn't a good performance, and I didn't think it was as cohesive as I would have liked. So I kind of want to explore the reasons why that might have been.
I want to pin two things down. We talked a lot about Arturo Vidal finding space in that centre right pocket, and we talked about Isla, the right wing back, going down the right, Tim Ream being pulled out. We gave the best possible examples of that for the goal, but it also just happened a lot throughout the first half and the first 10 minutes of the second half, correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's just worth noting that's one of the major problems. Do you think maybe the US was surprised by Chile's formation?
Yes, I do.
5-3-2 because they hadn't done that before under Rueda?
I think like going into this, I think in like when they were first doing the kickoff show in the lineups, Taylor Twellman said, expect Gary Medel to drop in at times and almost be a third center back, which is maybe what the U.S. expected because we knew from our research that, and from the research that was sent to us, I should say, thank you, Luis, that Gary Medel does not want to be the holding midfielder. He wants to be a center back. Yeah. So maybe we should have then extrapolated that if they did go to a back three, it was probably going to be Gary Medel in there, not as a holding midfielder.
Yeah, and so he was right centre-back, right?
He was.
Yeah.
And so I do think that maybe that threw the U.S. off a little bit just because that changes the shape a bit more. Mm-hmm. And it probably explains why there was so much kind of confusion about those advanced fullbacks because if you're expecting them to be in a 4-4-2 diamond, that kind of necessitates a narrow approach for Chile, which means you're going to have lots of bodies in the middle. So if you're the U.S. and you crowd the middle, you're going to force them wide to that one fullback. And then you can kind of slide out wide and cover them if you're Tim Ream, for example. Yeah. But if you've got Arturo Vidal maybe 5 or 10 yards over towards that side, suddenly there's just a few more options. It's a little bit easier to find some space and some time. And I think that definitely threw the U.S. off, at least for the first half.
So let's get into maybe the U.S.'s defensive setup.
Sure.
I would call it sort of the classic Berhalter 4-4-2 as a base, but then the two wingers pushed really high, and it essentially looked like a 4-2-4 with us quite high up the field to begin with when it was semi-successful for the first 25 minutes or so, putting a lot of pressure on Chile and essentially forcing them into mostly long balls.
Yeah.
It worked for a little bit.
And that's the thing is that, again, I go back to I kind of thought, just looking generally at my notes, that it was going to be U.S. looked really good in the first 10 minutes, Chile score, U.S. kind of get rattled and back off.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. It was first 25 or 30 minutes. It worked. When the U.S. would press very high in that 4-2-4 and the back line stepped to midfield or to like right around the center circle, they were really good at causing problems for Chile. Chile inevitably hitting that ball long or trying to hit it long into space. And really...
Like for the goal, right?
Yeah.
The goal that then Horvath clears to Zaides to Pulisic. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, for the U.S.'s goal, but for Chile's goal, I mean, it comes about because they're forced into a long ball that goes out of bounds and the U.S. take a bad throw in and lose a bunch of challenges. Yeah. But it's like, again, it's sort of...
3 headers in a... We forgot to mention that, right? In the build-up to that goal, they lose 3 headers in a row, don't tackle someone. It was all Chile just winning the ball better.
But it's where their system, their approach worked, and then their technical ability let them down, them being the U.S. there.
Yeah.
That, like, they forced Chile into a long ball. They just then gave the ball back closer to their goal than they should have. It's basically like the NFL equivalent would be forcing the team to punt and then fumbling the punt so that you've now basically let them advance 40 yards up the field.
So why did the 4-2-4... So what we're essentially saying that the Chile goal that happened was almost a blip in terms of the US having a pretty good first half an hour, right? And then those problems became more apparent, the Vidal-Isa problems, as the game went on. Why did the 4-2-4 stop working for the United States?
Because I think this
4-2-4 defensive shape.
This is where we go back to the earlier conversation about the United States sort of being erratic in their approach, or not necessarily being uniform in their approach, because we would see them at times. We saw at one point Chile tried to play it long into the feet of maybe Castillo, and Omar Gonzalez steps out 10 yards and wins it on Chile's side of the field and puts that pressure on, wins that ball. The United States retains possession. But as the half went on, sort of, I guess, back and forth, we would see Omar Gonzalez drop off 10 yards to try to win a header or anticipate a through.
He loves to do, right?
He does.
Because he's most comfortable heading things away. He does like to, if a runner goes with him, I think of him as not like, okay, I trust the offside line. I think of him as, okay, drop, and I'll just win the header.
Yep, and that definitely happened on a number of occasions. But the other thing I would note here is that it wasn't just Omar, and I think that's what's very telling to me, is that you would see Castillo start to do a sort of like a quick change of pace as though he was going to make a diagonal run across for a long ball over the top, and Matt Miazga would see that and drop back 5 yards because he thought that run was coming. And what that says to me is that there's a lack of familiarity, that Matt Miazga doesn't necessarily, not that he doesn't trust Omar Gonzalez specifically, but that he doesn't have the relationship there.
He was probably watching October 2017.
Yeah, maybe. But I think he probably wasn't
Sorry, I shouldn't have said that.
If you don't have that familiarity, then you might just think like, oh, I'm just going to drop off just to be safe. That's the instinct, is I'm worried about getting beat over the top, so I'll drop off. I'll back up a little bit. And if Omar Gonzalez sees Matt Miazga do that, then he's going to back up a little bit. And so as the half went on, you started to see times when DeAndre Yedlin and Tim Ream would be pressed up or stepped up to midfield, and then Omar Gonzalez and Matt Miazga would be 10 yards behind them. And eventually it went from all of the U.S. players in like a 30-yard space to getting stretched out. And suddenly it's when Chile had the ball at the top of their own 18 and Giassi Zardes went to put that pressure on, we would see Matt Miazga. We wouldn't see Matt Miazga and Tim Ream because they were out of the shot because they were so far out of the play. And I think once you start to get stretched like that, it opens up even more space through the middle.
And then if Arturo Vidal is trying to find that space, and always Chile are trying to find Arturo Vidal, and you're Michael Bradley trying to cut off passes to Vidal with the angles, and you're Paul Arriola trying to cut off passes to Vidal with the angles, it works better when everybody's tight, right? Because your angles are smaller. Once things stretch, it's almost impossible to cut off those angles, right? The job gets harder as the team gets more stretched.
Now, I think there's another reason why the United States starts to get a little bit more stretched and maybe isn't quite as focused on that 4-2-4 aggressive running. And you spotted this one. It's the injury to Christian Pulisic.
Yes. Okay. So he comes off, 35th or so, round about there.
You got it.
He's injured for at least 10 minutes before that.
Yeah, if not more, yeah.
You can see him not fully limping, but jogging kind of slow and gingerly. And I think that leads to essentially just less pressure from the US force. Because in the 4-2-4, Christian Pulisic is essentially Zardes' partner in the center.
I mean, there were times when he was leading the press, he was ahead of Giassi Zardes at times.
Right.
And then as he's a little more injured, he's a little more reticent to make those 40-yard runs because he can't. So then the rest of the team isn't going to all go charging forward and leave Christian Pulisic standing there because, again, then you've got
because you press
open
together.
Spaces. Yeah,
you press together or you don't go at all.
Yeah.
So I think, unfortunately, Pulisic's injury is what killed the momentum of the US putting pressure on Chile. And by the time he subs off, Lletget comes in.
Yep.
Lletget's good at pressure, right? His pressure is what caused the Ecuador giveaway for the goal for Zardes a few days ago. But I think the momentum's gone at that point, and we've been stretched, and we've dropped backwards, and suddenly this is Chile's game. And the last 10 minutes of that first half are the stuff of that's the stuff of nightmares that was in my head. I was praying for halftime.
Yeah, I mean that's where you have the Tim Ream, the bad back pass. You have Ethan Horvath with some bad kicks and some kicks out of play, and just some silly giveaways. 38th minute is when we talked about this on the quick take. That's when Omar tries to make a play on the ball and instead just kind of kicks it out of bounds. Very bad technique there. Goes to apologize to everybody, loses his mark, and I think it's Castillo then.
His mark was Vidal.
It was Vidal, that's right, who I think ends up maybe not being able to control the quick throw as well as he would have liked. But that's just the U.S. switching off, and I do think it's a 1-2 punch of we haven't been pressing as much because Pulisic has been injured, but I also think we have lost our talisman, our best player, the most creative player, the one who's going to lead this attack.
The one who done a goal.
Exactly. And so I think those two things combined, the U.S. is just on their heels a bit more, and that's why you have those final 10 minutes of the first half with the United States really, really struggling. And again, it's not even as though it was just the goal was being peppered and Horvath was pulling out saves or the defenders were just throwing in blocks.
Yeah, it's weird how few chances there are when you go back and rewatch it, which is some credit to, I guess, the setup or the scramble defense of the players, but it still looked bad, right?
We've talked about the idea of a quicksand game, right? Where if you're playing and you the first pass you overhit and the second pass you underhit, the third time you get the ball, if you start thinking, I hope I don't mishit this ball, that's not what you want to be thinking when you're trying to play a pass. And if you have the entire team thinking, ooh, I mishit that last one, ooh, I mishit this one, you can just see them all sort of, okay, I'm just going to kick it out of bounds. This is the better option at this point. I'm just going to hoof it out. I'm just going to play it backwards because I don't want to make a mistake. And so you start to see people less willing to take risks, and with that comes a complacency in, I'll just make the safe play, which seems that way, but then if you apologize to the fans for making the safe play and switch off and don't mark, it's no longer really the safe play that you've made.
Oh, okay. And then we come out in the second half.
I'm sorry, I let us down a rant. I apologize.
I think Berhalter tried to fix it by just tweaking the system at half time.
Yep.
What little tweaks do you think he tried to make, and how successful were they?
I mean, I think
this is before the big change, big tactical change, right?
I think it really may have just been as simple as Tim Ream, maybe at halftime, he talked to Tim Ream and Paul Arriola about one of you needs to communicate a little bit better about who's going where. Because we did start to see Paul Arriola at times dropping in and marking Arturo Vidal so that Tim Ream could go wide and deal with Isla. Yep. Sometimes it was Arriola who dropped in and was almost like a fifth defender there, and then that allowed Tim Ream to stay central. Again, it wasn't a uniform approach where it was like, oh, clearly now Tim Ream is staying central and Paul Arriola is going wide, which is why I think it probably was, to your point, a kind of just a little adjustment of you two figure it out. Maybe it's a case-by-case basis, but you two need to improve your communication and what you're doing. And maybe it was a little bit more Paul Arriola dropping in rather than trying to cut off the passes into the feet of Arturo Vidal.
And I would say it didn't work enough.
No.
It didn't work enough, right? Chile still looked dangerous. Vidal was still getting the ball. So then Greg Berhalter makes the big change. He brings off Corey Baird. We'll get into individual performances later, but I think also just performance-wise, it was fair to bring off Corey Baird. Brings on Daniel Lovitz, who's a left-back, goes to a back five. So Tim Ream is now just fully left centre-back with Gonzalez centre, Miazga right, Lovitz is left-back, and Lovitz is essentially then just matched up with Isla, and it's a much better marking job than Ream having to be like interior left-back, then out wide left-back. Lovitz can just be there the whole time. And then it also, I think the big thing is that the three centre-backs allows certain centre-backs to step out and win things again, with the safety of knowing there's two more guys deeper.
Yeah.
You see Ream come to midfield and mark Arturo Vidal and cut off passes to him. You see Gonzalez start coming back out and winning things, and Miazga the same. The whole thing starts looking better reasonably quickly, right?
Yeah.
There's still a couple of minutes of panic just after the change, but you see it settle in. You've got the four midfielders instead of just Michael Bradley trying to stop everything. You've got 5-4-1. The US kills the game.
And I think in the quick take, I was very negative about this. I believe I equated it with shooting a horse so that you could win the race.
You did.
I think
it was entertaining.
I think it's more defensible when you look at it from the perspective of they have lost Christian Pulisic, again, going to be their creative player. If you don't have him and you look around at the people that they have on the bench and the people who they have on that field, I think it's a practical choice from Greg Berhalter of it's better to sit back and try to play in a back five so we can try a little bit of a new thing and see how that works, but also maybe catch them on the break on a counter. The U.S. had, two counterattacking opportunities once they went to a back five. But I think that makes more sense if you're trying to see out a game than we're going to stick with it, keep doing what we've doing with arguably, not even arguably, but inferior players in that technical department.
There's no Arturo Vidal
exactly,
for the US. Yeah.
Exactly. And then eventually I think that's going to lead to you continuing to get stretched, and eventually you get caught, and then maybe it's 2-1, and then you're pushing again, and maybe it's 3-1. So I think Greg Berhalter maybe saw the writing on the wall and thought, okay, we're going to play for the 1-1, and we're going to kind of not necessarily explain it away, but if asked, I bet his defense is going to be, we kind of saw the way the game was going. We wanted to, work on our defensive shape and killing off the game and frustrating the opposition, and we think we did that in the second half.
So here's the positive version of this. Mm-hmm. If the US is away in CONCACAF and things are looking bad and we just need a draw, if the US, maybe that's not a great example, if the US is winning against a really good team in the Copa America, or the US is away in CONCACAF and winning and needs to shut a game down, it looks to me like Greg Berhalter has the tactical nous to do that, right? If you wanted to draw a positive from this, he has the tactical nous to do like triage, stop the bleeding, and get everything safe again. Mm-hmm. And that's a valuable thing in a coach. That can get you a point on the road, then get you a win on the road, then that can get you a valuable result in a tournament against superior opposition.
So I would agree, and that is definitely the positive way to look at it. But I would argue that if you're the general and your players are requiring triage, something has not gone well.
Okay.
And I do think that, and I hope people have waited till this point to tweet us, because we've been fairly positive about Greg Berhalter or not really mentioned him. But I do think some of the things the United States got wrong here, or some of the reasons why the U.S. didn't look as sharp, were because of decisions Greg Berhalter made, specifically the amount of rotation in this starting 11.
Yes. Okay. So my big theory is that Aaron Long and John Brooks were so good against Ecuador. Aaron Long has been so good against Panama and Costa Rica. Chile is the big test so far. Aaron Long needed a game against Chile. Aaron Long and John Brooks together needed a game against Chile. 1, to give them the experience. 2, to give them more reps. 3, to have them go up against this superior team to see what they can do.
Yeah.
And Greg Berhalter's decision to essentially take a look at everybody, including Omar Gonzalez, who everybody's had a good look at for a long time. I could have told you that Brooks and Long are the superior partnership, or maybe even Brooks and Miazga I could have handled. He chose a weaker defensive pairing against a superior team, and this is what you get.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where I have sort of a little bit of frustration with Greg Berhalter, because to your point, Ecuador they're a good team. They're a good squad. They're going to be problematic. They're difficult. But again, they were playing very defensive. That is a very different game than what we saw from Chile tonight. And I think that if you're going up against a more talented team, if you end up playing Mexico in the knockout round or in the final of the Gold Cup, this game against Chile would have prepared defenders for that game against Mexico, or against a team that we might meet later on who are going to be more attacking and more aggressive in that attack. And I don't know if Brooks and Long are as ready for that, because they didn't play this game.
Yep.
I know you don't want to get stuck into a situation where you're playing the same 11 over and over and over again, because then you kind of fall into the Jill Ellis line of criticism of there's not enough rotation, we haven't given enough opportunities to other players who maybe could increase the level of performance from the regular starters. I'm not saying we should go that route, but I do think that in these games, in these early games, I would rather continue to see more consistency so that the team looks more cohesive than it did tonight.
And also just play the best players.
Also that.
That are in, not like that are in the entire pool, but that are in the roster right now.
Yeah.
And give Aaron Long the chance to go up against Chile and Castillo and Vidal and all of that. Yeah.
I'll say, when we talked about it in the preview, that we thought Yedlin was going to play wide as an attacker, I was really disappointed not to see him there. I understand why. That I think they wanted to do a more defensive approach and have a more standard right back. I think Nick Lima could have done that job. I would have liked to see Yedlin continue to be used in that more attacking role, again, for a start, and to do it over 90 minutes or 75 minutes or what have you, to see if he looks better there, starting and playing that whole game in that role, because that answers the question. But now he's done that for 15 or so minutes or 20 minutes against Ecuador, but now he's gone back to playing fullback. We still don't know if he can do that moving into the middle of the field role. Maybe he can, and that we have that answered. But it's again, there's more question marks around certain players that I thought we wouldn't have coming out of these two games. I'm not trying to be unrealistic with my expectations of I wanted everything resolved after 4 games, but I still think...
Here's your 2022 lineup.
Yeah, I still think there were missed opportunities in some of these games.
So do you want to go through maybe player by player,
Sure.
just to think about performance? I think we should do everybody, in fact. I would like to start with Ethan Horvath. Off his line quickly a few times, really good.
Yep.
Hugged the near post for the goal, not so good. His kicking was a major problem for me.
Absolutely. His distribution, and a few times we can't be 100% certain it was him because it would cut back from a replay or a close-up of a player or a fan that we didn't need to see the ball 50 yards in the air, 20 yards from the U.S.'s own goal off of a corner, or off of a goal kick, rather. That, to me, was something where either he played it short and it didn't work, so it was Omar Gonzalez just booting it up the field, but more regularly it was Ethan Horvath trying to play out of the back, and when that wasn't on, looking long. But when you're going to go long, if you want your goalkeeper hitting that ball long, you want the distribution to be regular. You want it to be at the head of Jesse Zardes. You want it central. You want it wide
so
of the
can
channel.
Guess where to be.
Exactly. You've got to have some way to know where you're going to be so that you can put numbers around it when that ball comes down.
Yeah.
Instead, it was sometimes long, sometimes short, sometimes low, sometimes high. It was just entirely too erratic.
And the other thing that worried me, I mean, we knew going in that Sean Johnson and Zach Steffen have better feet than Ethan Horvath, but I didn't know it was this bad, is what I'm thinking after seeing this. Because I also saw a lot where, this is a regular goalkeeper thing, you do the chipped ball out to the wing to try and get the ball to your fullback or to your winger. I don't think he connected any of them. Some of them were overhit and went out of bounds. Some of them were just a toss-up and the guy had to challenge for a header.
He had that one to Tim Ream that Tim Ream jumped up and almost kept in bounds, but it still ended up going out. Yeah.
So that was rough. And then the other moment for me is Tim Ream will get the blame for the back pass. It's a Tim Ream back pass that he didn't look up. He passed it to Ethan Horvath.
34th minute.
Castillo intercepts. Castillo, I think, had a great game. This is the one moment where he could have done better. This was essentially an opportunity to score, right? When you watch, Ethan Horvath then apologizes to Tim Ream. So the only thing I can think is that Ethan Horvath called for that ball.
Yes. I think he absolutely did. He just didn't see the run from Castillo. I think Miazga tries to give a shout, but it's too late. So to your point when we were watching this, Ream probably should have had a look up before he just blindly plays the ball backwards, but it's still Ethan Horvath not being aware of everything that's happening, even though he has the best view of everything that's happening on the field. So I think Ethan Horvath was one who I was really excited. I wanted him to start over Sean Johnson because I have been excited to see what he's going to bring to this team. I think the answer is not a lot when it comes to the Gold Cup.
Okay, yeah, so let's think about this in a Gold Cup sense as well, right? Zach Steffen, probably the number one starter if available. Sean Johnson, I would say right now, is the number two. And remember, we're only... Essentially, the next time we pick a squad, it's the preliminary squad for the Gold Cup, 2 friendlies, and then the actual Gold Cup. So we're getting close. I would have said Ethan Horvath number 3, but I am less certain about this now. I think there could be someone else takes his spot for the Gold Cup after this performance.
I do wonder if maybe it's going to be Brad Guzan is the number 3, even though he wasn't called into this camp, and there was a lot of ink spilled about that one.
Yeah.
I do wonder, the way Berhalter explained it away is like we know what Brad brings to the equation, and maybe it is just that for this camp he was going to be a number 3, or he wasn't going to get many minutes. It didn't really make sense to bring him in, but for a Gold Cup and for those June friendlies, we're going to want him in there to compete, to be like maybe the number 1, maybe the number 2, maybe the number 3, but we want our best 3 goalies in there, and I think that will probably end up being Brad Guzan. Right. I think Horvath had a chance.
Or it'll be Nick Romando, because it always is.
Or Bill Hamid. We'll see what happens.
That's the other possibility. All right, let's get to the centre-backs again. Miazga and Gonzalez. I had some problems with a few things Gonzalez did, like dropping too deep. Some of his passing out of the back was not good enough. The thing with the throw-in I find really worrying because it's like a mental switch off, and he's the experienced player. So I don't know. Berhalter seems to really like Omar Gonzalez. I think there's so much other talent that I don't know that we need Omar Gonzalez.
I didn't see enough from Omar Gonzalez to justify him getting looks over other players, as in distribution, for example. One of the reasons why we've heard Cameron Carter-Vickers wasn't included in the squad or hasn't gotten as many looks is because he's not as good with the ball at his feet. So I kind of, if that's going to be the justification, I expected to see Omar Gonzalez looking very calm, very good on the ball. He has the one where I think he's in the corner, he chips it in that Christian Roldan eventually settles and plays forward. That's very good.
In fact, isn't that one of our best moves?
Yeah.
It's got the areola turn and then away we go. Yeah,
we're able to bypass the press, so that's good. But you've got to do that more than once in a game to really make me think, okay, maybe you can do this. And to be totally honest, it's also the fact that it's Omar Gonzalez, and there's the baggage from the failure to qualify. And so I think for him to come back in, it did have to be an even better game, and maybe that's unfair, but I think it's true that you've really got to prove like, oh, it is a different thing. I see why he was called in. He is a better player. Oh, he can do this. Oh, somebody else can't do that. I didn't see
the bar's higher for him.
I didn't see enough from him tonight to make me think, oh yeah, he really is capable of doing those next level things that we want to see from our center backs. So I would say, yeah, he is one who I've got in the negative column as opposed to the positive.
Okay, what about Matt Miazga?
It's kind of in between. because I think he wasn't as directly involved in some of the more obvious mistakes and errors. I think he made some smart plays, but I think I still saw things in there that were sort of maybe not as decisive as I would have liked, because we had times when we couldn't tell which of the two center backs was doing the organizing, who was doing the most communicating. Mm-hmm. That probably should not be the case.
Which is maybe a problem.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And we saw Miazga dropping deep as well, which we didn't like. So there's that.
Yep.
I don't remember so many mishit passes from Matt Miazga. I do think of him as a better player bringing the ball out of the back than Omar Gonzalez.
But again, I don't remember him doing that many. I don't remember him.
John Brooks line breaking or Aaron Long line breaking.
I remember Omar being the one who was a little bit more aggressive at times to step and try to win the ball. And so I think really maybe Omar had a better game, but I think he also just had more high-profile mistakes again, and his distribution was for every time there was that chipped ball to the middle that was good, there was the one that he would just club out of bounds for no reason.
It's maybe worth saying this as well. We haven't said this in a big picture way. Chile's press, when the US tried to pass the ball out of the back, was just more than we could handle for like 80% of the game.
Yeah.
Right? Every time someone's touch would let us down, right? Or someone's bad pass would let us down. But one guy that never let us down with a bad pass, and he would have been the guy I would put money on to do it, DeAndre Yedlin.
Yep.
I thought apart from losing Opazo for the goal, Yedlin did almost everything right, including having some really nice touches in possession and some really smart, disguised passes even, especially when he went to wing back and got a bit farther forward.
I would even add that, like, for that goal, in the past we've seen Yedlin kind of switch off or go, like, mark the wide player and leave his man wide open in the box. This one, you could make the argument that maybe he shouldn't have left Opazo, but I think there's also a number of reasons why I think it was okay that he did. Like, I can see what
it's almost like he was too switched
on
to the danger in the middle.
Yeah, basically, I think.
and
then he tries to make a play when the shot is coming from... was it Aranguiz who gets the shot?
First,
yeah, like he tries to close that one. So I can even understand that. So with that said, I think everything else I saw from DeAndre Yedlin I was okay with. The times that he would, the one or two times we saw him go central and try to collect the ball. And even the one that I really enjoyed was in the first half, we saw him screaming at the rest of the back line to get forward. And he really wanted the U.S. to be more aggressive.
And he was correct, right? Because that was the problem. They dropped too deep. Yedlin, captain, telling the back line to move forward. Miazga Gonzalez should have been doing that as the centre-backs. It's their job.
Yeah, and similar to the Ecuador game, there were a few times when I saw him make runs at the back post or the far post or just sort of make smart runs to get open, and then that ball didn't come, and you could see him get frustrated. But he was still making smart runs and trying to do smart things to help the attack while still doing his job defensively. So I thought it was a very good performance from him.
Same. Again, he got beat once, right? Someone clowned him and got to the end line just the once. But for 90 minutes, just one defensive mistake, that's not so bad.
So again, my only negative thing
if
about...
you count the leaving.
But my only really negative thing about Yedlin is just, not really even about him, it's just that I wanted to see him as a more attacking player just to see what he could do with the start.
We just didn't get forward enough for it to happen, right?
Not so much.
Quickly to Tim Ream.
Yep.
It was an odd thing, right? He was following instructions, we think. He ended up then being pulled all over the place. Maybe he did a bad job of just following the instructions and not thinking big picture. I've said this already, so maybe we've already reviewed Tim Ream.
No, I mean, the one thing I would add is he's a little similar to Giassi Zardes for me in that for every game where I see Giassi Zardes do three very good things, there's that one thing where you think, that's really not what we needed there. And we'll talk about Giassi Zardes later on, but there's a couple things that I think could have been sharper and would have made him better. Tim Ream, or his performance overall better. Tim Ream is the same. That for everything, especially in the game against Ecuador, we thought we got tweets about maybe this is our new left back. We've maybe found our left back. And then he has that one bad pass that he doesn't look, and it ends up almost giving Ecuador a chance.
Yeah.
He does the same thing on a couple occasions in this game. He just has some questionable decisions that...
Oh, and I would argue, even though Horvath calls for it, if that's me, if I'm Tim Ream, I still look before I pass that ball.
Yeah, and I think you can see it...
And I see Castillo and I don't do it.
I think you can see it, true. I think you can see it in his reaction. That if he felt 100% like this is Horvath's fault, he doesn't stand there with kind of 1,000-yard stare for a minute and recognize what have I done? So I think he knew that was a mistake. But just, I guess the bigger thing I'm trying to get at is that what I want from a player is I want to be able to not worry about that player. And I mean this when we play soccer. If there's a person in there who I know, Daryl Grove is a competent, capable center back. I know he will do the job at center back. I don't need to worry about it.
This past Sunday, accepted.
I mean, cancer factors into things, my friend.
Right.
Let's just add that real fast. But that's I guess what I mean. And the more question marks, or the more you're like, ooh, Tim Ream's got that ball. Please don't make a bad pass. That knocks it down for me because it's a thing you have to worry about. So I think that's...
He's still going to the goal curve, right?
He is, but that's more... Strangely, that's my bigger concern. It's not the oh, maybe he went too wide, maybe he was asked to do that, maybe he wasn't, maybe he could have been more vocal. It's those moments of what are you doing madness that make me more concerned, but I still think he probably comes out of this... probably as on that Gold Cup squad, or very much in consideration for it, for sure.
But then we should also be looking for other left backs. Maybe just in case.
So. But I think the versatility of being a left center back probably helps him there too.
Michael Bradley, I'm going to say as per usual.
Yep.
Right? Some great chipped balls. There's one to Corey Baird that Corey Baird doesn't get to, but it's a perfect pass. There's the other one, which I think is also to Corey Baird, where it's like an on-the-run, weird, low-driven ball inside the left back for Baird on the overlap.
Yep.
Baird puts the ball in, and I think it's just too far behind Christian Pulisic. You know the play I'm talking about. It was a perfect ball from Michael Bradley that possibly should have resulted in a goal. It was so good, right?
Yep.
So some good forward passes, but the defensive crouch, the trying to play the angles, the not being aggressive enough to match Arturo Vidal et al. And remember, Vidal's older than Michael Bradley, right? I know Vidal's a special player in terms of energy and intelligence and all of that, but this was really an example of this player is on a much, much higher plane than Michael Bradley, and he can't handle him.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And I think Bradley was not captain in this game. It wasn't necessarily all built around him. So I think that was designed to take some things off of his plate. And we still saw those moments of ooh, why is he just doing his shuffle hop at the top of the box as opposed to trying to put in a challenge? And there were other ones where he still kind of wasn't as committed into a tackle as maybe we would have liked to see, or maybe would have been useful in that moment. But I do think...
There was no Tyler Adams to come in and bail him out.
There wasn't, no. But I do still think, at the end of these two friendlies... I still don't have an answer to who gets that start. If we're
Bradley or Trapp.
Bradley or Trapp as that number 6, but I'm more okay with that because I think they're one of the few ones where both of them had decent enough performances over the course of both games that I think okay, they're both still in consideration there for that starting spot.
And also there's no other number 6 who can hit those passes, who can do what Berhalter wants, and we won't be playing Chile at the Gold Cup, right? We'll have the ball a lot more.
We sure will, yes.
All right, ahead of Michael Bradley, the two attacking midfielders. To begin with, Christian Pulisic, we only got 35 minutes out of him. We got a goal. We've already really talked about him, maybe. If he's fit, he's going to the Gold Cup. Do you have anything else you want to talk about with Pulisic?
He was hesitantly my best player for the U.S. tonight, which is saying something in the 35 minutes. I've already talked about my criticisms of maybe he was a little bit too focused on getting those goals, but he was the one who really, as we talked about, once he goes out, that press kind of breaks down a little bit. He scores the goal. He looked like his combinations with Jassi Zardes were looking pretty good. He was a consistent threat and clearly was the player that Chile were most afraid of and put the most attention on. So I felt like with all that said, he was still the one that they were focusing on defending, still to get a goal and to get so many opportunities. I think it's a very good performance. So yes, I feel like he probably goes to the Gold Cup. Yes.
Yeah. The news from what I saw Jeff Carlisle tweet from a Berhalter press conference is it's a quad injury, not like an ACL or anything like we were scared of at the time.
Yeah. I really thought he tore his ACL.
Yeah,
I really did.
Right? You have some flashbacks because you did it.
Yeah, it was just because ACL isn't always blinding pain.
Yeah,
you can just hear, when I did it, I heard 3 pops, and I just always heard 3 pops is a bad thing. Then I had blinding pain 2 weeks later.
Right.
But that's what I thought this was, oh, something's really uncomfortable, something just feels weird, and you could see it in his face that something just feels off. But then the ice came off pretty quickly, and it seemed like he was okay.
Yeah, so we don't think it's that.
Let's hope not.
Yeah,
Let's hope not.
But the quote was, he's having an MRI pretty much right away. So that probably by the time you hear this, that's happened, and we'll know about Christian Pulisic.
We will.
Okay. So he was the left attacking mid, left central attacking mid. To the right central attacking mid, it would have been Weston McKennie.
Yep.
We didn't get to see Weston McKennie versus Arturo Vidal. This would have been a great game, I think, for Weston McKennie to be in, for us to get a look at him, for us to see him go up against people. Instead, it was Christian Roldan. And I've got to say, I've always looked forward to seeing Roldan in a US shirt to see what he can do after his Seattle form. Against Panama and Costa Rica, he was pretty good. This was Christian Roldan out of his element.
I would agree. And
I feel bad saying it, but that's what it looked like to me.
Do you feel bad saying it, or do you feel bad saying it, know that you're going to hear from Seattle fans?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I feel bad for Christian Roldan because I know he's a real person, right? He's a professional soccer player and he's trying to make his way in the world. And I'm sitting here saying he wasn't good enough to go up against Chile.
No, this is going to be a weird way of explaining this, but I loved Jeff Agus when I was a little kid, and I remember the first time I saw Jeff Agus have a terrible game, and it stood out because I think the first 10 times I watched him play, he was just lights out. He was a lights out defender, and I remember he was really bad one game, but I just remember that because it was a rare thing. And so then you kind of have that expectation of like, oh, he's going to up his game next time. And I do think that maybe that's what this was for Christian Roldan, because I don't remember a time when I've seen him, again, as you said, he just kind of looked out of his depth on occasion. We talked about the kind of going in for a challenge when Chile got their goal, but even that was like a very minor incident in relation to a lot of him misplacing passes. There was the one in the 34th minute, I think, that we both wrote down as like Roldan. What do we write down? I have it in all caps somewhere. I can't remember where it is. But it was basically just like it was a series of bad passes, two of which involved Christian Roldan just playing a 5 or 10 yard pass straight to a Chilean player in like a 5 seconds period.
And what I saw this as, again, Chile
Roldan passing calamity, 54th minute.
Calamity, that was
there
the
it is.
word. I just had passing calamity.
There we go.
This was Chile pressing us and us trying to play our way out of pressure. And not only Christian Roldan, other players as well, but specifically a few times Christian Roldan, trying to play fast to make it happen with a quick pass. But that quick pass was then off target.
Yeah.
And that is, I think that's maybe a sign of he can't quite do it at this pace against this opposition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, I just, it did not feel like as good of a performance as we've seen from Christian Roldan. It wasn't terrible enough that I think like, okay, we are done with him. But again, all the way back to my very beginning point, you saw some of the limitations of this squad, and I think we saw some of the limitations of Christian Roldan tonight.
Yep. Oh, can we end on a Christian Roldan positive?
Sure.
Before the Pulisic goal, there's a moment where Roldan intercepts a ball at midfield that Chile are trying to play and just drives down the right wing, and then I think he cuts it back to Yedlin. And that I was thinking, oh, Christian Roldan. But then there's all the misplaced passes, which kind of weighs heavily on one side of the scale.
Yep, it sure does. He did take a corner when Christian Pulisic was hurt, and the corner looked okay. So there's
it
that.
looked better than Pulisic's.
But again, now we're kind of grasping at straws.
Yeah, so I wouldn't rule him off the Gold Cup roster, but I think in terms of those central attacking midfielders, he's definitely dropped down the depth chart a little bit.
That said, the reporting today from ESPN's Jeff Carlisle was that West and McKennie, I think it was a source within Schalke, said that West and McKennie will miss the rest of the season. So if that's the case, Gold Cup might be a long shot. We'll see how his rehab progresses. But if so, then if you remove McKennie from the depth chart, maybe that does keep Christian Roldan around, if not as a starter, then in that squad because you don't have Weston around.
All right. To the left, Paul Arriola. Was impressive against Ecuador. I can't tell if he had a good game or not here because he had so much trouble with Vidal.
Yeah.
But he also had like a few good attacking runs that then didn't quite result in anything.
Yeah.
I do remember him putting in a lot of effort, busting it up and down.
I think maybe the more damning thing for Arriola is just that in contrast to what we talked about with Miazga and Omar is that Arriola did play both games. He was a holdover from those two lineups. So maybe you would have expected him to just have a little bit more confidence and look a little bit sharper. But maybe the difference there is that against Ecuador, they had so much of the ball, he wasn't really tasked with drop in, make sure Vidal doesn't get the ball, make sure you cut off this angle, make sure you cut off this pass. So maybe that is where he kind of was let down a little bit by playing both games, if that makes any sense.
It does. On the other side, Paul Arriola we expect to be on the Gold Cup roster, right?
Certainly.
Not just because of versatility, but also because I think he understands the Berhalter system. And I just think he also looks like a good guy to have around the team. Corey Baird on the other side. Berhalter likes him. Baird understands the movements, understands the system. I think even against Panama's B team, Costa Rica's B team, we saw times when maybe he just didn't quite have the technique and the end products and all that sort of stuff. I think that was doubly obvious here against Chile. There were just more than one too many times when essentially there was just a technical failure when Corey Baird got the ball. I can't think of a more of a softer way of saying it.
Yeah, he was one of my three players that I think is probably out of consideration after these games because
is that with us, with fans, maybe with other media, but maybe not with Berhalter?
Well, I'll say
is it bad enough for Berhalter?
For me, it was nothing about Corey Baird's performance tonight. Gosh, that sounds so harsh. But like, I didn't see anything from him that made me think like, okay, that is definitely what we need from him. Because even he had some good off the ball running, and he did some good like link up play, and then he charged forward
the left side end line.
But then he gets the ball and kind of miscontrols it and takes it away from goal, and then his pass after that is to a Chilean player. Same thing on a couple other occasions. We saw him sort of when he did get the ball, it was maybe a heavy touch, or maybe the cross was behind Christian Pulisic, and so he can't quite control it in the box. And
this is after the Bradley ball. Baird's in behind. So again, good example of Baird knowing the movements, knowing when to get in behind to be available for that Bradley ball. But then you make the movement, you get in the space, you receive the ball, but then you've got to deliver. And then that pass to Pulisic, it looks like Pulisic messes up and he doesn't get to it. It's because Baird has played it behind him and made it kind of impossible to get there. That might be the perfect example of the pros and cons of Corey Baird.
Yeah, I agree. And so I think if not, like I don't ever want to be the person who says like, oh, I'm done with this person. Like,
yes, I'm never using that phrase. People who tweet that are not my favorite.
I mean, I guess like I'm done with Jeff Agus now. I don't think he's going to be coming back. I'll say that much.
He's working for MLS in the competition department.
See, there we
go.
Yeah. Well, maybe he will come back. You never know. But I think there are other players I would rather see get opportunities on that right wing ahead of Corey Baird at this point. DeAndre Edlin, again, being one of them. I think it would be interested to see what he brings in. I wouldn't mind seeing Jonathan Lewis start in one of those upcoming friendlies.
He had another cameo, didn't he?
He did have another cameo and looked like Jonathan Lewis. Turned under pressure, dribbled at people, wanted to try stuff.
Yep.
I want to see Jonathan Lewis get some starts. Let's do it.
Johnny, as Greg calls him.
Excuse me.
Final Corey Baird thing is there's the other really good Michael Bradley diagonal that clears two Chilean defenders and drops to Corey Baird. Not inside the 6-yard box, but not too far away from the 6-yard box. And all Baird can do is get like a weird side foot at it that just puts it out. It was almost like it was a defensive clearance, right? Another thing where he understood the movement, was in position, but a technical failure when the ball came to him.
Yeah. And that was one where, again, I feel like we shy away from this type of criticism, but that was one where like this is Corey Baird's maybe his fourth cap. He might have one more than that or two more than that.
He didn't play against Ecuador. He played against Panama and Costa Rica.
Yeah.
I don't know if he played before.
So maybe it's his third cap. But I feel like this is a weakened Chile team. It's a team that did not qualify for the World Cup, obviously. But it's still probably one of the best teams he's ever played against, certainly at national team level.
Yes,
and
definitely.
And so I just think there were moments where like he just assumed like, oh, that ball is not getting to me. Oh, that cross isn't coming in. Oh, this is a good enough pass. There's another one in the second half where he has kind of like he goes for a through ball and instead hits it straight to the hands of Arias. And just moments like that, it felt like he wasn't quite up to that next level of competition that we would like to see the U.S. national team be performing at.
So he wouldn't be on your Gold Cup roster.
He would not. No.
He wouldn't be on mine. We'll see if he's on Greg Berhalter.
You know who would be?
Gyasi Zardes. Okay, why so?
I mean, I did not
goal against Ecuador, assist against Pulisic?
I did not expect to say this coming into this one.
All right.
I did not after these two games. But I think they're similar to Tim Ream. There are the moments where I still have my Gyasi Zardes. I still have my questions. There was the one where it was like a little bit of a chaos. I think it's the one where we thought maybe Sebastian Lletget was fouled at the top of the box, but Zardes is on it. He's the first one to react. He gets through two Chilean defenders.
He outmuscles Gary Medel, holds him off, and gets to the ball,
and then his shot is wide and over. And that's that moment where like, yes, he's under pressure. Yes, he does well to fight off Gary Medel. Yes, it's always going to be a tight angle. And like, I'm sure expected goals people out there are very annoyed with me for not knowing what this one would be.
I'll bet it's a low XG.
Yeah.
Right? But I don't know if there's like a version of XG that's like, can you get it on target versus can you score?
Yeah. But
right?
but I guess that's the difference for me. It's not as though Arias has proved himself to be a lights-out goalkeeper right now. He is not. We don't think he's going to be their starting goalkeeper. We'll see what happens with Claudio Bravo.
Lights out, and then like sometimes he looks like he's playing with the lights out.
There we go. So I just think, if Gyasi Zardes can get this one on frame, maybe it's saved, but maybe it's spilled wide, and then there's a rebound shot, or maybe it turned out for a corner, and then we see what happens. So like, there's always one or two of those moments from Zardes. He has another one in the second half where he drops in to try to link up play. He tries to play a one-touch pass and basically plays it to Arturo Vidal at the top of the box. That's not very good.
Yeah.
But then he has the moments like the turn to set up the assist for Christian Pulisic. He has the moments where he leads that line and really is the one who's aggressively stepping forward. And then he had plenty of those moments where his back is to goal. He brings the ball down, or he flicks it on, or he plays it into space. He's looking to link up play and facilitate attacks. And I think right now, we'll see how everybody else continues to perform over the next couple months, but I think he's earned that spot, or at the very least has earned consideration in the squad for that spot.
And right now he leaves March with a goal and an assist. Yeah, Josie Altidore may be his first choice by Gold Cup. I would imagine Gyasi Zardes is second choice, right?
Yeah. I mean, we'll see what happens with Bobby Wood the rest of the season. No, I mean, and I think, and then you look at the fact that Christian Ramirez did not play a minute in either one of these games.
That's weird, right? I think that's the sort of unwritten, unspoken about story of this camp is that Ramirez had two really great substitute appearances in January, including a goal and then the flick on for what resulted in the Areola goal in January. Was on the bench for the first game, on the bench and didn't see the field for the second game in March. I think either he's been terrible in practice, he's been slightly injured, which would maybe explain his absence in the first game, presence in the second game on the bench, or maybe there's been some weird falling out. Something has to have gone weird, right? I mean, Jordan Morris came on and replaced Zardes. That would have been a chance for Ramirez to get another 15.
But I think that maybe you have your answer right there, which is that Jordan Morris came on. Jordan Morris we think of as physical and fast. And, I mean, can score a goal, don't get me wrong, but maybe that's what Berhalter's looking for, is a little bit more mobility and pace up front from that forward.
Especially the way this game went, right?
Yeah.
Towards the end, there was no way that a Ramirez-type player was going to be useful. It had to be pace, because the only way we were scoring from that 5-4-1 was in some sort of transition.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's a good point.
But all that is just to say that Zardes certainly did enough to cement his spot ahead of Christian Ramirez. And if we're looking at maybe Josie Altidore as being the only other option, Bobby Wood not called into camp, then
Josh Sargent maybe, depending on if he's going to be...
Maybe.
I mean, Olympics will be distant, right? October or so, Olympic qualifying. So
But I mean, if he's not lighting it up and if he's not getting minutes and scoring goals, then does he justify calling over Josie Zardes if Josie Zardes continues to perform? I don't know. We'll find out.
Any subs that got enough minutes that we should assess their performance? The Jet was on the field quite a long time. I'm not sure he did all that much. He contributed to the defensive effort in the 5-4-1.
Yeah, I mean, I think we saw him where we wanted to see him play centrally. The difference was that we wanted to see him play with Christian Pulisic on the left to see how that combination worked. We didn't get that, and I think we saw Paulo Areola doing a bit more defensive work, especially in the second half. So I think that kind of limited what Sebastian Lletget was able to facilitate in terms of the attack.
I'll give you my quick take on Daniel Lovitz. He did the job in terms of filling space with Isla. He also still let a couple crosses come in. He didn't quite block the crosses. Lewis, you've already touched on. Will Trapp came on, and we saw the Will Trapp, Michael Bradley double six midfield for a little bit.
There you go.
I thought he looked perfectly fine, Will Trapp.
Again, I think both of them will continue to get looks and consideration and call-ups because I think they both looked fine over these two games.
Yes. All right, any closing thoughts?
I think Will Trapp looked better than fine. Let me rephrase that because I thought he looked very good against Ecuador.
Agreed. Any closing thoughts before we wrap up this show?
No, I mean, I think I'm happy to have done this show, even though it's been a long one, just because I feel slightly better having talked it out, because I kind of went into the rewatch thinking, are we starting to see Greg Berhalter be like, yeah, we're going to play a system. We're going to change it. We're going to change it again. This guy's going to go here. It started to feel a little bit like there was more variation without sort of like the evidence behind it to support that variation, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But to look at it again and realize like, oh no, there was a bit more reason to this than there was just sort of throwing solutions at a wall and seeing what sticks.
I'm going to be sad because I wish there were more Greg Berhalter US national team games to think about in the near future.
Well, you'll get some more upcoming.
You'll get some news tomorrow. Final bit of news, the draw for the CONCACAF Nations League is tomorrow night, March 27th, 10 p.m. Eastern. We'll find out which two teams the US is drawn with in League A. I want it to be Trinidad. I want us to go away to Trinidad and have that competitive game again.
You will get no disagreements from me.
Keep your eyes on the Twitters for the results of that draw.
Do it.
All that remains to say is, Taylor Rockwell, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Right back at you, buddy. And worth noting, we'll be back tomorrow. Dale and I will be kind of revealing a new wrinkle to the Total Soccer Show.
Oh, yes.
Even if Twillery doesn't allow them, we do.
A partnership. I accidentally revealed it today in an interview with Protagonist Soccer.
So
go read that interview if you want to get the news a day early.
All right, but if you don't, you'll find it tomorrow. But then you'll also have another show from us. We're going to do some listener questions tomorrow.
Yes.
And then I believe either Thursday or Friday, I'm not sure yet which day, it'll be myself and Mr. Ryan Bailey reviewing the rest of the international window, or like the biggest moments, biggest happenings, biggest occurrences of the international break.
I look forward to hearing your take on all 10 England goals that were scored in this international break.
Yeah, that ain't happening.
All right, listeners, thank you for listening. We always appreciate it, and we'll talk to you again soon. You gotta slice it.